Okay, so yeah, that top part was just me hoping to get some more people who I knew were on the presentation, but who weren't in the Google Meet yet. I know that it did accidentally get deleted, so I did have to re-add it. So I'm sorry if that was, a problem for you guys. Also, if you are a walk-in and you did not sign up on PD Central, please go ahead and click on the link that says walk-in sign-in, and that will allow you to sign up and make sure you get your hours. So this session is supporting families of gifted learners. Just a reminder that you sign up for a 3-hour block, but you only have to attend 2 hours out of those 3-hour blocks, and the blocks are in purple. So for example, someone might choose the noon session and the 2 o'clock session. So although you sign up for 3-hour blocks, you only have to attend 2 hours out of those 3 hours. So you'll get 2 credit hours per block you attend. And Tiffany, if I say anything wrong, just correct me, because I know I made a few mistakes yesterday.
No, you're right.
Okay, so my name is Christy Mudd. My email is christina.mudd. A lot of people have a hard time getting hold of me because I go by Christy. You can follow me on Twitter at cmudd19. I tweet a lot. I do often take part in the GT chat on Twitter also. So I do tweet and retweet a lot of gifted resources and things like that. All right, I am in a new role this year. I'm now a deeper learning resource teacher for the Curriculum Design and Learning Innovation team. I have taught, though, for the past 9 years in grades 1 through 5. I have taught at a gifted and talented camp for the past 9 years. Those are grades 4th through 8th grade. And then also I taught an advanced placement and gifted and talented class 4th and 5th grade for 4 years at Greenwood Elementary. I do also have my gifted and talented endorsement. Okay, so I know it's late in the day, and I know everybody's probably kind of ready to start, taking it easy, but I did want to give an example of a getting to know you activity. I know a lot of us are moving into NTI, and we really know that beginning the year off in NTI is going to be a struggle to really build those classroom communities. So I have a Four Corners game. I have also linked all the templates up here as a resource if you want to locate them. But if you have the presentation open, just click on the Four Corners Jamboard. And I can also link that in the chat box if that would make it quicker. So what's going to happen is once you get there, if you'll go ahead and create a Post-it note with your name on it. Okay, so for example, I'll go over here to this little sticky note and I'll make mine say Christy Mudd. Okay, and it doesn't matter where the sticky note is right now. You can just kind of put it somewhere because we're going to play a little game. I'll wait for a few more people to make their Post-its and then we'll get started. Okay, so Four Corners is a game that we play in class sometimes as reviews, as get to know you games, everything. There's a ton of Four Corner games if you search it. You can use it for elementary, but honestly, you can use it for middle school and high school also. I mean, I've seen people do it with adult presentations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read off a question, and each letter will have an answer. And so you'll put your name wherever the answer is that you feel like fits you best. I found some questions just at Four Corners all about me. I found it on Teachers Pay Teachers. Honestly, I know Teachers Pay Teachers sometimes can have good things and sometimes really bad things, but honestly, I just needed to get to know you questions. You could also always create your own, but I was just looking for something already made for the presentation. So we're going to get started. So this is the get to know you I have. And so you notice a lot of them are really more for schools. Tiffany, can you see the get to know you questions? Like, how do you get to school? Since I'm sharing my whole screen. Tiffany, you there?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Can you see the questions?
Yeah, I am. I can see them.
Okay, I was just curious. Okay, so like you might do that. Now, obviously, how do you get to school doesn't pertain to us. So we're gonna do, what is your biggest fear? So if your biggest fear are spiders, you're gonna put your Post-it in A. If your biggest fear are snakes, you're gonna put it in B. If your biggest fear are sharks, put it in C. And if your biggest fear are bees, put it in D. And I don't like spiders, so mine's going to stay in A. Okay, so I think a lot of people agree with me about spiders, something about all their legs. Okay, all right, our next one. What month were you born? If you were born in January, February, or March, you're going to put it in A. If you were in April, May, or June, you're going to put it in B. If you're in July, August, or September, you're going to put it in C. And if you're October, November, or December, you'll put it in D. And I'm a July birthday, so mine will go here. Okay, so a lot of July, August, and Septembers, and it looks like a lot of Octobers, Novembers, and Decembers. Sorry. Carol, you're only January, February, March. You're a lone wolf. Okay. So let's see. What do you here's one. What are you most thankful for? A, friends. B, family. C, your toys. I guess you could call that like your phone or something. And D, learning at school. Or we could call that one learning in professional developments. So this is, what are you most thankful for? I'll probably say my family, because I really don't get to see my friends right now. So, all right, and we're going to do one more. So see how they're all different questions, and you could change them. Okay, what makes you most happy? A, animals. B, rainbows. C, sweet treats. Or D, being outside. Oh, sorry guys, I don't know what I did. Oh, there we go. I like sweet treats. So that is what makes you the most happy? Animals, rainbows, sweet treats, or being outside? Okay, so sorry. Someone's trying to get in the session. I must have had a question. Okay, so this is just an example of a get to know you activity that you could use in NTI. You could use it in classroom too. Obviously, you would have physical four corners. I will say that I've had students with physical needs that didn't allow them to necessarily move from corner to corner. So you would either need to make sure that your space is accessible for everyone, or you would obviously need to alter this so that everyone can participate. I think about that sometimes with how our classrooms are so small. Anyway, if you want access to this Jamboard and other examples of Jamboards that you could use in your classroom, you can just click on the Jamboard templates. It takes you to a site with like 10 different ones that you can copy for yourself. Okay. So first off, I wanted to start with the fact that parents and caregivers are usually the first to identify a child's extraordinary gifts and talents. They recognize the above norm abilities, interests, and passions that are kind of different than the other children they might see. Parents can engage with their children to provide rich stimulation and learning experiences and discover ways to partner with schools and resources in the broader community. I have also linked the National Gifted site here, nagc.org. It's a site that I have gone back and forth. I use this site probably more than anything when I'm really trying to help my gifted families, but also when I want to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do as far as my gifted learners. I wanted to touch on one more thing. And we need to trust our parents, because although I know that all parents think their babies are gifted, we still need to hear them out, because the thing is they are the first to identify and the first to be around their children, and they know their children best. So we need to respect that, and we need to honor that, because a lot of times we want to downplay it, because like I said, a lot of parents think their baby's gifted, and that's okay. That's awesome. But I know that sometimes teachers will write off parents, and that's not, we need to make that a connection. We need to make that what's best for the students. Okay. Oh, sorry. Looks like some people are wanting to join. My bad. Okay, my apologies. Okay, so I wanted to start there with that our parents and caregivers are our first line. So the next thought, and this is This is at any grade. I feel like high school and middle school a lot of times want to think that any child that's gifted is going to be identified already before they get to them. And I don't think that's always true, because so often there's so many myths in gifted education, and so many people think gifted might mean well behaved, that a lot of kids are overlooked. So I think it's just as important for K all the way to 12th grade to actually acknowledge these gifts, because you might be that gifted child's only advocate. So recognizing these traits, understanding these traits, and helping parents identify at any grade level. So not all gifted children are the same, but many share common characteristics. So on the right, you'll see some of those common characteristics. This list can help parents identify and look for these characteristics in their child, but not only parents, but also teachers, obviously. But I think I share this too because I've had parents of gifted learners who because they weren't gifted themselves, they didn't understand their child. And a lot of times I would have some parents who thought their child, I mean, for lack of a better term, was like odd, who was different. And a lot of gifted learners do have different characteristics, but instead of recognizing that as a negative or as a why doesn't my child fit the mold, recognizing these characteristics as something that is truly remarkable and extraordinary, and that they actually might be gifted. So the more we can help families understand that, yes, your child might have a really odd sense of humor, that doesn't make them necessarily different. It could be part of their giftedness, depending on other factors. So I've also linked traits of giftedness, and then also I linked asynchronous development. It's a whole nother, I feel like, ballgame to dip into. Asynchronous development, it talks a lot about how a lot of gifted learners will mature in different ways at a different pace. So they academically might grow very quickly, but socially they might actually be behind. So that is a link to a PDF on asynchronous development. These are both things that you can provide to families to kind of help them understand their gifted child. And like I said, I know high school families might think, your teachers might not think this is for them, but you might get a ninth grader who was considered defiant, who was considered, an underachiever, didn't do their work. And you might see some of these characteristics and realize that they might be a gifted learner and they hadn't been challenged their entire school career. So I definitely think this is something to consider at all levels.
In your chat box, there's a few people that are saying that they have found students to be GT in middle school, that they the prize weren't labeled yet. They said they discover them in high school all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And someone asked about athleticism as gifted.
So first off, I definitely agree with the misidentification, and I think that's the issue in JCPS, which we're trying to change. Is that for so long it was in elementary, it's almost always based on the COGAT, and JCPS has not always been consistent with the COGAT. Sometimes they would only give it to kids, that they thought were gifted, where in fact everyone should be assessed. And as we're learning with Tiffany and the rest of the GT crew, that it shouldn't just be assessments; it should be other things, portfolios. Student recommendations, parent recommendations. So I think the reason you probably found so many middle school and high school students who hadn't been caught before, or, identified before, not caught, was because we relied so heavily on the COGAT, and depending on where you went to school, who your teacher was, might decide whether or not you actually even took the COGAT. And if, for those of you who don't know the COGAT is the advanced placement test that they give in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade in elementary school. I believe they might give it in middle school, but I don't think it's every year. If you want to correct me, Tiffany, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's not every year. And like in private school, they can request Jefferson County to test them.
Okay, and so then athleticism. So I've heard that, people who are like, well, every child has a gift, and that is, completely true. Every child has a gift. I just don't feel like every child is gifted. So can a child be athletically gifted? Yes. But I don't know necessarily if that is something we would service at school, because that's not necessarily academic. Once again, I'm not positive. Tiffany might even be able to chime in here. I definitely think there are people who are more gifted in athletics than others. I just don't know if that's something that we necessarily tie into academia. And honestly, with parents, I would suggest that they notice that their child's like kind of out of the norm athletic giftedness, definitely getting them in, sports, and not just one sport, maybe trying out multiple so that they can really find their interest. Tiffany, do you have any insight on the athleticism?
So in Kentucky, obviously in Kentucky regulation, we don't identify athleticism. There are, I mean, would have to research it, but I'm pretty sure that there are some regulations in some states that kind of note to it. So, but I would have to look into it a little bit more. So
I maybe have a little bit of something about the athleticism thing. This is Crystal Colston talking, but I just finished the WKU cohort for the endorsement. And so they talked about this whenever we were talking about the laws and the areas of identification. And they said that in the law that identifies the areas, that athleticism actually was taken out because of all of the money that goes into athletic programs at schools. It was taking away from the funding of the other areas of giftedness. And so that's
interesting. So it's more like if you really want to pursue it, you would need to do it independently.
Yeah, because it's not a identified area anymore.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving. So like I said, this is something that if you're getting a student who hasn't been identified yet, this is something you could actually hand to your parents. And the asynchronous development might also make some parents feel better about the fact that their child might not be socially growing at the pace that they are academically. And it'll kind of help them understand that. Once again, to let them know that their child isn't different. It's not a negative different. This is honestly pretty typical of a gifted child, and so that they can understand better. So if you've ever learned about, ever been to PDs and things about gifted students, you'll often see that they have social emotional needs. So some issues they may have, and not every gifted child is the same, but they might have heightened awareness, anxiety, perfectionism, stress, issues with peer relationships, and concerns with identity and how to fit in. Some suggestions I had, and then also I found on the NAGC website, is intentionally teaching and modeling stress reducing techniques. And you might have to be much more intentional about it with a gifted learner. You might actually have to, and we do this a lot in school, but the parents need to be modeling these things too. Belly breathing, deep breaths, yoga, mindfulness, those things. And NAGC also suggests not only teaching the child about it, but modeling it. So as the adult, showing them how yoga and mindfulness can really slow their thinking and calm their bodies. Teaching and modeling balancing tasks and expectations. So a lot of gifted learners who are perfectionists or who are extremely, aware of their talents, I feel like they take on too much sometimes, or they may push themselves too hard. So really intentionally making sure they understand how to set aside time for fun, or time for things you find enjoyable that aren't necessarily tied to school, and also creating schedules and a planner. So these are things, obviously they seem pretty simple, but families might think that this is something that, they only need to do at school. And then in fact, they need to be doing it in the home setting also, because it can definitely carry over. And also during NTI, they're clearly going to be with their parents and their caregivers more often. So depending on your grade level, if you know that you usually use social emotional lessons in your classroom, you could share those with your families. So belly breathing videos, Go Noodle, they have a lot of mindfulness on there too. Class Dojo has a lot of mindfulness on there. So letting your parents know that they might actually have to, take their child to the side and really teach them about them and model them and show them how they work. So identification. Once again, you might already have students that are identified, but you might have parents that want to know how to get their child identified. In the group setting or in school, we usually have tests and assessments, nominations such as student, teacher, parent portfolios, cumulative student profiles, and observations and surveys. But what a lot of parents don't notice is there are also individual assessments. We don't give them at school, but they I have had kids who their parents have had these tests given in an individual setting. So they've actually reached out to an organization. And off the top of my head, I don't know, like, Tiffany, do you know where they can go for these assessments? Because I had parents who did it, but I don't necessarily know exactly, like, doctor's offices and things like that.
U of L actually, it costs money, but you can get your child tested at U of L.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so U of L can test. It is money, but that's why I have kind of separate the individual assessments, and that's why they do still get identified at school also, because obviously not everyone has that money. But these are different types of tests, like the nonverbal, the Naglieri, I always say it wrong. It's a nonverbal test, meaning it's a little bit less biased. So for like our ELL learners and, to be more culturally responsive, sometimes that test can give us better results than like the COGAT, which, studies have shown that a lot of tests are biased and we might miss out on underrepresented populations. I've also linked here I've linked a website that you can give to your families about identification, how they would go about getting identified. And I know, guys, so this has started out really more for like, okay, what to do if a parent thinks their child is gifted and they need to be identified. These are kind of the first steps. So this is once you've realized you have a gifted learner. We noticed that motivation and learning is a huge thing with gifted learners, sometimes at school, but also at home. I had plenty of parents of gifted learners who told me that when they get home, they don't want to do anything. And I mean, that's probably pretty typical of a lot of kids, but maybe especially gifted learners. So suggestions for at school and at home is to help discover their interests. So interest inventories. I've linked an interest inventory there that you can use. So at school and at home, the more you can tap into a gifted learner's interests, the more motivation and learning you're going to have take place. So maybe the parent can't control what work is coming home or what work they're doing during NTI, but maybe the parent can say, do an interest inventory and really find out what that kid would work for. And they could say, okay, if you do your schoolwork, I know you really like this, you can do this afterwards. I'm saying that because obviously the parents can't change what work their teacher is giving them. But if the parent does have any voice and choice, so if teachers are asking interest inventories from the parents, or they're communicating well, or if the parent really knows their child really well, the parent could advocate to their teacher through a meeting and say, like, look, I know they really enjoy these things. This is what really motivates them. And communicating really closely with the teacher. That way the teacher can maybe design things to meet the interest of the gifted learner. Signing up for enrichment programs to explore interest. So of a variety. I know a lot of times parents want their children to be interested in the same thing that they're interested in. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's usually the kid is doing whatever the parent is also enjoying. So they really suggest signing up for a variety of enrichment programs, because you can also kind of explore their interests and find out how they learn best through that. Now in JZPS, they have most enrichment programs are during school, but then they have things such as future problem solving, quick recall, and things like that they could apply for after school or, sign up for. Okay. Work with your gifted learner on times that work best for learning at home. So this is a big thing. You might want to intentionally tell your parent, talk to your parents about talking to the learner about when do they feel like they work best. Because, and I feel like this is a good strategy for all learners, but your gifted learners might be very aware of like maybe they have times of the day where they're less stressed. Maybe they have times of the day where they feel more motivated. And really being honest with them and working with them to set up a schedule. So that they really get those things accomplished, and it's what works best for them. This last one is probably one of the most difficult when I've worked with gifted learners, helping the gifted learner develop a growth mindset. Once again, not all gifted learners are the same, but a large majority of gifted learners that I've worked with have at least a little bit of perfectionism, and they have a really hard time making mistakes. I've had students who would refuse to do any work. And after they'd shut down and I later on was able to calm them down and talk to them, They were very open with they would rather do zero work than to do any bit of work and risk getting it wrong because they had such a fear of failure. So sometimes with your gifted learners, you might see their blank page and you know they can do it, but they are not okay with making that mistake. And so we really have to, talk to your parents, but also in your classrooms, really develop those growth mindsets, work on how, it's okay to make a mistake. And why is it okay to make a mistake? And what can I do if I do make a mistake? Go over possible outcomes so they are prepared. I am a huge perfectionist, so I really feel like it helps me work with my gifted learners. So with my perfectionism, a lot of times I'll go over worst case scenarios and I'll say, okay, if I make this mistake, what's the worst thing that could happen? And a lot of times the worst case scenario actually isn't that bad because then I already go ahead and go over the next steps. Okay, if that happens, what can I do to change it? So I didn't put it as negative as worst case scenarios. I go over possible outcomes. So a lot of times if I saw my gifted learner really stumped, I would walk up and I'd say, if you get this wrong, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? And I would ask them and we would talk it out. And after we talked about how I did standards-based grading and I did grading to mastery, so they were allowed to correct their mistakes. So them recognizing, okay, if I get this wrong, I'm gonna get this back with feedback from Miss Mudd, and it's gonna coach me through how I can do better. And I know that I can redo it and really, change my learning, change my thinking, and turn it back in. So I really do think that helps, is going over the possible outcomes and making sure that they understand that a worst case scenario they're probably going over their head is really horrible, but it's actually probably not as bad as they think. Okay, so this is just honestly a slide of parent resources. When I was really creating this presentation, there were so many resources, so many good resources that I was like, how do I include it all? How do I go over everything parents need to learn? And it was really hard, and I don't think I can even touch the surface. So honestly, some of these links you all might want to explore and think about what fits best with your families. So these are all links. So if you click on Start a Parent Group, it's all about how to create parent support groups within, your gifted learning community. So whether that's you as the educator, hosting a parent night where maybe they can just interact with other gifted parents, or whether you encourage the parents to form those connections themselves so that they don't feel so forced. The next link is just helping your gifted child succeed. Gifted 101 is really kind of the things I've already covered, how to identify, what it means, what are some of the terms. I've also linked to the JCPS Advanced Program brochure. That really helps parents understand how they qualify in JCPS and also what programming they should be receiving. We have many advanced placement and gifted and talented students who are not necessarily receiving the services they should be. And if parents know that, they can advocate for that and they can speak up and they can talk to their school about what they're being provided as a gifted learner. I've linked Summer Learning. That's NAGC's website, and it has just different examples of how to find summer camps, what to look for in a summer camp. I've also linked U of L Summer Enrichment Camp. I should have been there last week, but obviously we couldn't have any summer camps. So that Summer Enrichment Camp is 4th through 8th grade. And like I said, I've worked there the past 9 years, and it's developed around gifted learners. And it's project-based, so it's very fun. We go on field trips, things like that. There's also a link to games and toys for gifted children. And then here is another just another website and link on exploring summer camp options. Something they say over and over again, even in these summer learning experiences, is parents need to know their learner. They need to know their kid. And I know that's probably a weird thing to say to your parents. So, maybe instead of saying you need to know your child, you could give them some of these resources, because that's what's going to help them find a summer camp option. And maybe you make suggestions. Maybe you know of some summer learning experiences or after school learning experiences, and you can suggest those to parents.
Chrissy, you have a comment.
Okay.
They said, when we were in Madison County School District, we really need resources telling us what our rights are as parents, because the school refused to provide gifted services unless the son changed his behavior. I had to do a lot of research to find out what I could hold the district to?
Yes. So like I said, that's definitely something that's an issue and I'm going to touch on that in a second too, but I'll go ahead and talk on it. I found, and I was in 4th and 5th grade, like I said, so it was a little bit earlier. I found that many of my parents didn't know what it even meant. So, I mean, honestly, the students usually take the COGAT, which is the advanced placement test, and then their parents never, they might get a letter. They'll get a letter about whether they, what score they got, but depending on what school you go to, you might get a different, it's not consistent across the district. So what I found was that many families had no clue what the scores meant. They didn't know what it meant for their child. They didn't know what options they had. And there's also many teachers who don't know that there is a gifted service plan for every identified gifted learner. And sometimes it's the counselors that, complete that. Sometimes it's the AP, depending on who's your gifted lead. But the thing is teachers also need to be more aware of what services they need to be providing, within the classroom. So definitely, if you are a parent of a gifted learner, it definitely helps to educate yourself and advocate. And honestly, it didn't bother me. When I knew a parent was advocating for their child and they would ask me like, okay, what are they doing, this and this and this, I would answer. Because the thing is just like your special education ECE students, your gifted children should be serviced. They should be getting differentiated, instruction during the day. And I'm a very big advocate of that. And I see the gifted service plan doesn't necessarily hold as much weight legally yet, but in Kentucky at least. But I see it as, the same document as an IEP. And if their gifted service plan say they should be receiving this, they should be receiving this. And that's going to take also a lot of more training of teachers in our district. Yes. Sorry, go ahead, Tiffany. What?
I said I just agree with you that it's just the fact of people need to be trained and know the importance of, especially like the GSSP, and what you put on that document is legal. And if you put something on there that the child's going to get, then they should be getting that service.
Yes. And when she says GSSP, that is the gifted service plan. Okay, so I have linked here also. I know a lot of people are concerned about NTI. So I have a few things to touch on that. At the bare minimum, you could provide your families with these 2 resources. So on the right, if you click on this, it'll take you to the Gifted and Talented Choice Board from the spring. I'm not, Tiffany, do you all know if you are adding to it this fall or? Yeah.
We do not know yet.
Well, but here's the thing. It's still there. It still has a lot of options on it. And the thing is most people were so kind of not thrown it, NTI was a big thing in the spring that a lot of us weren't ready for. So you might not have shared this with your gifted families yet. So on the right, it's not just grades 4 through 5. It'll take you to the link for all grades. And then also if you click on this, it'll take you to, this is CAGE, Kentucky Association for Gifted Education. And it's actually like 5 or 6 pages, and it has all grade levels, activities that those parents can do at home with their families. Now, I've given you these, but I consider these like the bare minimum. Honestly, when you design your lessons, whether it's in person or NTI, I know that as teachers, we're very much trained that we go to start creating a lesson, and my mind automatically goes to, okay, what am I going to do for my students who can't read? Or what am I going to do for my students who don't have parents at home and are struggling? So we immediately go to those thoughts. And I believe most teachers were thinking about that in NTI too. So I did a lot of voice recordings so that my students who couldn't read could at least hear it. But that's what we need to be doing for our gifted learners too. So, in the next few weeks, when you design a lesson for NTI or a project-based learning unit, make sure there's an aspect of it that is more challenging. That does not mean your gifted learners get more work. That is a big myth in gifted education, is that I told my last session in high school when I was in all advanced classes, the difference between advanced social studies at one point and non-advanced social studies was that I had an extra project. And that's not what it should look like. It should be more challenging work, more in-depth work, maybe more difficult text. And so as you go to start planning, you need to consider those things. If you're not ready to dive in quite yet, this would be a place to start, starting to find some of these lessons and activities that if your gifted families are like, you know what, they need something more challenging, you could send these as something they could work on also. Okay. So this was actually one of my biggest projects when I taught advanced placement and gifted and talented at Greenwood Elementary. So on the left side, we talked about parents and caregivers advocating. If they know that their child has been labeled advanced placement or gifted and talented, the parents should be asking, obviously the teacher should be providing this information, or the schools should, but if not, the parents should be asking what types of programs are being offered, because there's all kinds of different ways to service gifted learners. There's pull-out programs where they get pulled out of class and they get to go to an enrichment period. There's differentiated lessons within the classroom. So as I was mentioning, maybe they're doing more challenging work than the other students around them. Not more work, but more challenging work. And that would be a form of servicing gifted students. Consider their student interest and learning style. So once again, parents really need to consider that. And maybe they haven't really thought about asking as far as education-wise what their interests are. So maybe they know a lot about their child, but they really haven't asked them a lot about like what they like to do at school. How do they like to learn at school? Parent and student tours to get comfortable with the school. Not only if the parent has a tour, obviously this might be different in NTI world, but the parent would be able to ask those questions, and then the student would be able to, well, we saw that with a lot of gifted learners, there's anxiety, stress, heightened awareness. So even joining, going to a new school might set those things off. So being able to see the school beforehand might make them feel a little bit more comfortable. So my leadership project at my old school was the fact that not just my gifted learners, all my learners, but my gifted learners who had strong interest, who I could see, my gifted art students, they weren't applying to the art magnets, Western and no. My extremely gifted students who had, top scores on the COGAT weren't applying to the gifted program at no. Not that there's anything bad about the schools that Greenwood fed into, like as middle schools, but I didn't understand why some of my kids weren't applying to other places. And so we held a parent night that was specifically for advanced placement and gifted and talented parents. The entire first part of that parent night was about what it means to be advanced and gifted. What do those scores mean? Like I said, a lot of our parents would get a paper with a score of a 21 or a 22, and they had no clue what that meant, 0. And then we would talk about what those things meant and then what services their child was going to receive. We also held school transition nights. So I taught 5th grade. So like I said, many of my parents and families had no clue about what programs were offered in middle schools. And I'm sure middle schools to high schools. And even if you have a 9th or 10th grader who you think, oh my gosh, they should be at YPAS, or they should be, in the aviation program. Oh my gosh, why is this child not? So obviously in 5th, 8th, and 8th grade, this is important, but also being aware of these programs in the district so that if you get a kid at any level, you can know how to help them. So we spent talking about what AP and GT meant, all the scores. We talked about what services they would receive at Greenwood. And then we would go into all of the programs at middle schools. We would talk about, I would invite middle schools in to come and talk about their programs themselves. And then we also sat there, this was before the window closed for applying to middle school, and we would actually help parents sign their children up for middle school programs. We would talk to them a lot about kind of the system of, certain schools don't ever get to their second pick. So we would talk them through that. We talked them through a lot of the parents. The reason they didn't apply is because they didn't understand that if they got accepted to magnet programs, that they had to be provided transportation. And many of my families couldn't drive to these schools that were all around the district. So this was a huge eye-opener to me. That the fact that some of our families who maybe weren't gifted themselves or who aren't as familiar with the JCPS system weren't being able to take advantage of the amazing opportunities that we have in the district. So I really think that's a big deal at every school. If you got a 7th grader and you're like, oh my gosh, this student is so talented in art. I know you hate to lose those kids at your school, but like if you know that another program would be better for them, it's just really talking with those parents and informing those parents about their options and what we have to provide them. Sorry, and if I'm talking too much, guys, like I said, just stop me, Tiffany, if you need to. This one didn't have as much interaction. Some of my personal takeaways about gifted learners. So like I said, I've worked with gifted learners for a while, and this is not true of every gifted learner. You might find a gifted learner or a parent of a gifted learner that it's totally different, but this is what I saw consistently. Students and parents wanted to be updated about their grades constantly. And I don't blame them. So my way of being proactive so that I didn't get emails and phone calls daily is I had frequent progress reports. You can get these progress reports on Infinite Campus. I would have like a parent session, usually at open house, where I would explain the progress reports, and then also I would type something up with explanation. In NTI, you could have a parent Google Meet. You could have a parent meeting to inform them of these things, because I know it's going to be a little different. And the progress reports, I'm thinking NTI. I'm sure there's a way to do them digitally and possibly sending them without maybe student names. But if there's also an option of sending them paper, I know on Google Classroom, you can actually have a grade book there and on Infinite Campus. So maybe you could even walk your parents on how to find the progress reports on Infinite Campus, since they are digital. I use standards-based grading and grading for mastery. And I really think during NTI, the district is going to be pushing this. And the thing is because that's students working towards mastery in a standard, and it's not necessarily just doing 20 individual assignments. I really think my standards-based grading and grading for mastery helped build growth mindset, because it was the assignments I gave, it wasn't the end. They were allowed to take them, look at the feedback I gave, and then they were able to correct their mistakes. And they knew they could ask for help. They knew we could fix this. And I didn't give them answers in my feedback. It would often be a guiding question, because a lot of times I felt like they didn't fully understand what I was even asking, maybe on the assessment. So allowing them to redo and turn it back in. And then also with standards-based grading is building to mastery. And in the end, if they don't turn in a single thing, but on the assessment, they've shown mastery, that still counts as them mastering the material. I don't use percentages. I don't use averages. I don't use any of those things. It's all about building the growth mindset. We did intentional lessons on it being okay to fail. So whether you want to do that with your students or whether you really want to talk to your parents about reiterating how important it is to let them know that it's okay to fail. It is okay to make a mistake. It is okay. And, but then also valuing their feelings and their stress. Like I said, as perfectionists, and then also with observing what I've done to students and what other teachers have done to students, is making them feel like their feelings are silly. Oh my gosh, it's just one question. Well, the thing is to that student, it might not be one question. To that student, it might be the end of the world. And so first, even if we do kind of see it as something small, valuing the fact that it's not small to them. And first valuing their feelings and their stress, talking it out, and then figuring out next steps, okay? Calming them down, getting them calm, stepping away from the problem, and really just asking them, okay, like, what can we do? How can we improve? And things like that. What will help you get past this? Could we cover up this problem and you just go ahead and move on to the next one? And that's something that I feel like is very personal. Is so often people don't recognize that something that might be small to you is huge to possibly a gifted learner or any learners. Okay, so once again, this is my information. And if you guys want to email me or, comment on Twitter or any of those things, I am here to help.